In our last video, we thoroughly went over how to state a claim and pick a side in an argumentative essay, and how this occurs in something that we call the thesis. Now we're going to practice by doing. Today we're going to look at the introductory or the first paragraph of your argumentative essay. Let's look at how to build your first paragraph. It's important to note that the first paragraph of an argumentative essay is the most important. Let's say that after class today, you decide that you've had enough about learning to write argumentative essays and you're going to go home and build a giant robot. Because why not? At the top of your robot, you put a head, and inside of that head, you put all of the computers, the systems, you've got a pilot in there, whatever you need to make your robot run. The rest of the robot may be able to do extremely cool things, but without that control center, your robot is useless. Think of your introductory paragraph like the brain or the control center of your essay. The rest of it only functions because the control center is keeping it running, and your essay doesn't even begin to get going without these core components. These core components, or the things that make up every introductory paragraph, are these three things: the hook, context, and a thesis. So let's begin by looking at the hook. Note number 2. The introductory paragraph starts with a hook, which is a way to engage your audience. You've probably talked about a hook when looking at other forms of writing, but to keep it basic, a hook is a way to rope your audience in and get them interested in what you have to say. In argumentative writing, hooks are often, note number 3, hooks are often startling statements, real-world examples, questions, and interesting statistics. These are all some good examples of hooks that work in argumentative writing. So let's look at those hooks in action. Last video, we discussed a theoretical debate topic of cell phones being banned in classrooms. So let's look at a really good example of an introductory paragraph about that same debate. I'll read the whole thing and then we'll discuss. Last month, my father was rushed to the hospital with a heart attack at 9 a.m. Everybody was worried that he wasn't going to live. They took him to Memorial Hospital, where he had several more heart attacks. My mom tried to call the school all morning to get in touch with me, but the phones were busy every time she tried. I was in biology dissecting frogs while my father was dying. Schools should rethink the ban on cell phones, since this is the major way that parents can communicate with their children. We'll talk more about that example in a second, but can you see the hook in that opening sentence? Last month, my father was rushed to the hospital with a heart attack at 9 a.m. It's a simple statement, but it's one with impact. As a startling statement, it draws me, the reader, in to see what the writer will say next, to see what will happen. Here's another example of a hook in a different debate topic. This debate topic being, should metal bats be banned in youth baseball? This one opens on March 11th, 2010. A high school pitcher in California was facing a player using a metal bat when he was hit in the temple by a line drive traveling 100 miles per hour. His skull was crushed, and he spent weeks in a coma. Fortunately, after surgery and months of rehabilitation, he survived. The accident brought to the forefront an issue that has been a safety concern ever since the 1970s, when metal bats began being used instead of wooden bats. Metal bats are dangerous and should be banned by youth sports leagues for several reasons. So can you see the hook and how it immediately appears in there? It opens with this example that's just outright shocking of this person being injured, and how that directly relates to the topic of metal bats. It's a hook and it draws you, the reader, in. We won't go through all these, but look at the beginning of these examples. This one says, individualism is a fundamental part of society in many countries. Most people believe in the right to express their own opinion without fear of punishment. This value, however, is coming under fire in an unlikely place, the public school classroom. The hook in this one isn't as directly startling as the last couple, but it does put forward an interesting scenario a couple sentences in. It states that individualism, which is also stated as a fundamental part of society, is coming under fire in the public school classroom. It has you, the reader, questioning, how is freedom coming under fire in the public school classroom? You're drawn in by this internal question that it brings up. One more hook, this one in a more formal style, starts, in an increasingly complex and competitive business world, How is a company to generate the creative ideas needed for ongoing success? Of course, this one isn't wild at all like some of the others we look like, but it still works as a hook. It asks a question to make the reader think. How is a company to generate creative ideas? This one comes off as more formal or professional in tone, which matches the topic and the business people or people in an academic environment that are going to be reading or listening to this. So now that we've looked at hooks, let's look at the next part, the context. Note number 4 is that every introductory paragraph should have context in it at some point. You've got to give your readers some background information. Out of the 3 parts of the introductory paragraph, this is probably the least distinct or easy to pinpoint. It's also probably the most flexible. Sometimes your context will be a part of your thesis. Sometimes it will stand alone. As long as it's in there and it's giving the reader some background info, you're good. And as always, the best way to see this is to look at examples. Flashing back to the cell phone debate, the cell phone paragraph does an excellent job of showing this. After our startling hook to get us going, the author gives background info to set the scene and prepare the reader for the thesis ahead. We feel the author's frustration at the fact that their mom couldn't get a hold of them in an emergency. And what that does is it primes us as an audience to sympathize with the argument that they're about to make, that schools should rethink their ban on cell phones. The baseball paragraph does the exact same thing. The baseball example we looked at also gives context or background information. After our shocking hook of someone being hospitalized, it mentions that the accident brought to the forefront an issue that has been a safety concern ever since the 1970s, when metal bats began being used instead of wooden bats. It provides context. It says that this is a long-standing issue or debate of whether metal bats are safe to use in baseball or not. You get the ideas with context. You give the reader the info they need to move forward. So let's go ahead and move forward to looking at thesis statements in introductory paragraphs. Note number 5 says your thesis usually comes at the end of your introductory paragraph and sets up your claim or the main argument that you will make. Let's look at examples. Again, we have our debate about cell phones. Here we have schools should rethink the ban on cell phones, since this is the major way that parents communicate with their children. What's their argument? Well, they clearly state that schools should rethink the ban on cell phones. Going to metal bats. With this one, the thesis at the end of it is that metal bats are dangerous and should be banned by youth sports leagues. It's clear, it's to the point, and it comes at the end of the introductory paragraph to push forward the reader into the debate coming up. Looking at one more thesis. In this one, the author seems to begin an argument in support of school uniforms. School uniforms are the better choice for 3 reasons. See how distinct and clear that is. They directly say, school uniforms are the better choice for 3 reasons. And they're going to give you those 3 reasons in the body paragraphs coming up further in the essay. When you're writing an introductory paragraph, write it thinking 1, 2, 3. 1 being the hook, 2 being context, 3 being a thesis. Doing it just like that will make it much easier to write. And look at examples if you get stumped. Come back to this example here in this video or one of the others that I put up on the screen. Start out with number 1, a hook, move on to some context on the debate that you're going to be addressing, and then give your opinion, your thesis statement. We'll be moving forward from the introductory paragraph in our next video when we look at the body paragraphs and evidence. Thank you for watching and have an awesome day.